Namaste. Good evening. Has anybody asked you what is the most important thing in your life? Have you really analyzed what is really the most important thing in your life? Oftentimes when people ask that, or are asked that, they say, well, family is the most important thing, wife or husband if they have one, children, of course, most important thing, house, home, job, education for a good job, career, making sure there's food on the table, rent is paid, things like that. But basically, these are all the ephemeral or temporary things that go on around us. These things can change, in other words. They may be here today or gone tomorrow. Or eventually, kids leave, the house is empty, things change, our purpose in life changes, our identity changes sometimes willingly, sometimes not so willingly. So all this is like the part of the ephemeral world that we exist in. But what is it that really matters? What is it that really lasts? That is what we need to really understand. Because basically, as it says, that working for that which is temporary is like working so hard for nothing at all. Because you have it for a while, then you may lose it, you may lament for what you've lost, or sometimes you're glad that it's gone. Just like some friends of mine just recently. Their life was going on very nicely for them. And then they came home and there was a fire and basically the whole house was burned, damaged greatly, and they had lost everything. So suddenly their life is in a complete change of what they had, what they thought they were, what that was going on. So what is it that really matters most? How can we understand what goes on in this life and into the next? What is it that we do now that will make a difference in our next life? What are we going to find in our next life? Because as most people realize too late, that this life can be very short. So an example of that is a story about a king in the olden days. A very opulent king, powerful, had a huge, beautiful castle that he lived in, controlled a vast army, big empire, could eat whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, beautiful harem to do what he wanted with, all these very nice things. And that was his identity. But then he had a dream. And in that dream, he found himself as a possessionless beggar, wearing tattered clothes, very thin, very hungry. So he was traveling down the road in this little village, and he knocked on the door of one house. And the people that answered, they were questioning him, what is it that you want? What can we do for you? And the beggar king, who was now a beggar, was saying, I am so hungry. Do you have anything that I can eat? And the family said, well, we just ate our last meal. We have nothing more for today. But if you go down the street, maybe just a mile down the street, there is one building where they serve the poor and the ragged. So go there, and I'm sure they'll give you something to eat. So he dragged himself a mile down the street. He was very tired, very weak, but very hungry at the same time. So then he knocked on the door, and there were so many people already inside, but they said, if you're looking for something to eat, we've already served out everything we had for the day. We have nothing more today, so come back tomorrow and we can give you something. So he was standing there. The beggar was thinking, how did I get here? How did this happen? Why am I so hungry? What am I supposed to do? And then the king woke up in his plush bed, nice, smooth, fancy sheets, and he's wondering, what is real? Is this real? Being a king, opulent possessions, surroundings, or is being a beggar for real? Is that who I am? What is my real identity? So he asked one of the sages of his court, and the sage, with his wisdom, identified what was the real problem. And he says, the problem is you're not sure of who you are. You have to understand what is the constant factor in each of those situations. As a king or a beggar, what is the constant factor? He said the constant factor is the I within the soul within. That is the constant factor. That is who you really are. You're the soul within who's identifying with your surroundings as a king or as a beggar or in whatever situation we find ourselves. He said that is what you must really understand. What is the I? Who you are? Who is the observer? What is the soul within you? And of course, what is our purpose in life? Where we're going into our next life? And of course, what is our relationship? What is the relationship between the soul and the supersoul or God? These are the things that we should understand. This is what's most important. Another example of that is the story of the boatman. Now, this story is told in many different ways, and I may tell it a different way the next time as well, and many different embellishments, but this is the way I'm going to tell it this time. So anyway, in the villages of India, sometimes there's a boatman which takes people across the river. And so in this particular situation, there was a high-class man that came and needed a ride across the boat. So he comes to the boatman and says, "Boatman, how much do you charge to take me across the river?" And the boatman said, 2 rupees. And he says, "Very well. Here's my 2 rupees. He got in the boat. Now take me across to the other side. And be hasty about it. There seems to be some storm clouds that are approaching. We want to get to the other side before anything happens." So he's rowing along, and to make small talk, the sophisticated man says, "My dear boatman, right now I'm going to a concert. On the other side of the river there's some beautiful and wonderful musicians that play beautiful music. It's like putting you into another world. My dear boatman, do you know much about music? Have you ever studied it?" And the boatman says, "Well, I'm just a simple boatman. We have bhajans and kirtans in my village. I like that very much. But the sophisticated musicians I have not heard much of, The sophisticated man says, "Well, my dear boatman, I say 25% of your life is wasted if you don't understand the finer things in life. But have you gone down to the city, 100 kilometers downstream? There's beautiful artwork made by very sophisticated artists. They have very fine talent. Have you ever seen that?" Boatman says, "Well, I'm just a simple boatman, and I don't have much money for traveling, so I don't usually wander very far away from my village." And the sophisticated man says, "My dear boatman, I say, I'm sorry to hear that. At least 50% of your life is wasted." So then he said, "But I've been reading some very nice books. Surely you are aware of books, aren't you? I've been reading one book, especially by Rabindranath Tagore. Have you ever read him?" And the boatman says, "Well, again, I'm just a simple boatman. I have not had much time for study or for reading, and nor do I even know how to read very much. I just simply row my boat, taking people across the street, and that way I take care of my family." The sophisticated man then said, "My dear boatman, I'm sorry to hear that, but at least another 25%, 75% of your life is wasted." So he was going across the river, and then the front came through. The weather changed very abruptly. The waves were coming up and down. The boat was going back and forth, swaying this way and that. Water was coming into the boat in due time, and suddenly he became rather fearful. So the sophisticated man asked the boatman, "What do we do? This boat is not going to make it. We're already getting flooded with water in here." The boatman says, "I'm sorry to say it, sir, but it is too much. The boat will not make it. We have to jump and swim to the other side." And the sophisticated man says, "My dear boatman, I don't know how to swim. How am I going to do that?" The boatman said, "Well, then I'm sorry to say this, sophisticated man, but at least 100% of your life is wasted. You're going to see that next world sooner than you thought." And he jumped out to save himself. So this is a point. No matter what else we do in life, no matter what else we learn, no matter what else we become absorbed in, basically without understanding the purpose of life, how to prepare for death, what we can do to prepare for our next existence, and ultimately how to understand who and what we are as this soul within this body, and to find out who and what that soul is. This is the ultimate purpose of life. Without that, basically, our whole life has been wasted. This opportunity of human existence is wasted. Let's make sure we don't do that. So whenever you think about what is the most important thing in your life, Try to analyze it from that point of view, and it may change the way you begin to think of things. And for that reason, I give you my best wishes to all of you to pursue this path, this great adventure actually, of understanding who we are. Because this life, which is very short when considering the eternality of things, is but a lightning flash on our great path towards self-realization. And that way, we can all help each other make the best use of whatever we find in this particular lifetime and use it to understand who and what we really are. That is the ultimate purpose of life and the most important thing. So thank you very much. Namaste. Jai Shri Krishna.